Hello and welcome to the Art of Teaching the Whole Child in a Pandemic, Cultivating Trauma-Sensitive Practices for Resilience. This is your Module 5 Introduction to Mindfulness and Regulation. So at this point, you've made it through to the month of March, and we're looking at moving forward towards 4 habits that stick to identify which strategy you'd like to create as a habit this month. So you're tuning into week 1, and then in week 2, you'll learn more about which of those strategies you'd like to incorporate, make it part of your everyday work, and then keep a pulse on that for the remainder of the month. So you are here in week 1, choosing that strategy. The 2 strategies for this month that we'd like to share with you are mindful focus and common ground. And that's the choice that you're going to be making this month. Of which of these do you want to cultivate more of, to see more peaks of in your classroom? So we're going to have 3 routines from mindful focus to share with you, and 4 routines from common ground to get us out of these pits where our students and ourselves are losing the mindful focus or losing common ground in certain times of the day, certain class periods. And we want to get around those pits and build more peaks in the day for both focus and common ground, keeping in mind that we're here because of the pandemic and the unpredictability and disconnection that we're experiencing, and how that's driving us towards more anxiety, depression, and burnout, and away from that focus, engagement, and wellness that we took for granted, really. And so the good news is that we have habits that we can build into our day to establish more predictability and connection, and this is all built upon the idea of habits and taking care of yourself. And so let's reiterate that that is so crucial to building more peaks in our day. And the peaks on the predictability side, of course, are knowing what activities to expect, how long they take, how and how often students participate. And the peaks on the connection side are when we have those positive interactions with students, cooperative participation, common language for our expectations, and we're able to calmly handle conflict. But of course, we're going to have pits in terms of our connection. We're going to have times, classes, where we feel like that was mostly negative interactions. There was uncooperative student participation, unclear language being used, and maybe we use some harsh approaches to our conflict, or maybe avoided it altogether. And so we are going to find those pits, and that's totally normal right now. And we're going to have pits in terms of predictability as well, where we are not knowing what to expect and how long activities take, and students start to tune out or lose focus in those times. And so we see a little more of these pits as well. The good news is during this month, we're going to focus in on 2 categories of strategies to build in-person, hybrid, and remote, whichever learning model you're in, to build more mindful focus and common ground. Because the good news is that research shows us ways that we can have predictable check-ins and conversation prompts with students, as well as clearly taught and visible expectations to reduce friction and foster a sense of connection. So both of these approaches can build more predictability or connection. It's up to you which one you'd like to build. So the objectives for this module is for you to review some habits for mindfulness and common ground, to notice the pits and peaks of mindfulness and common ground for you, and then select one routine that you're going to make more of a habit in your classroom. So you're going to need about 20 minutes to your clear headspace, your printed or digital journal, which looks like this, so that you can do steps 1 through 3. So tuning in already, you're already on the right track of completing these first 3 steps. And I encourage you to follow along in this video as you choose a mindful focus or common ground. Take notes in your guided notes to see which one is right for you. When I talk about mindfulness, I'm sure you're asking why would I be talking about mindfulness in my classroom? Well, going back to our diagram that we've shared already, is we have already in the school day the instructional time that's available to us, but then it's already gets cut down in terms of what's scheduled instructional time, right? And then within that is the time that we spend teaching, and then within that is the time that students are spent on task and engaged time and academic learning. That's when this happens. Academic learning happens when students are engaged and we're teaching, and that actually ends up being only 38% of the school day. And so this is really important for us to maximize this as much as possible. And one of the key factors of this is students' attentiveness to the present moment. And so whatever we can do to maximize their attentiveness to the present moment will definitely help us build more engagement and resilience for our students. But of course, we're going to have pits. And what do those pits look like these days with the trauma responsive mindset that we want to have, and recognizing that what the pandemic is doing to our students? It's going to look like fight, flight, and freeze, as we have been discussing throughout this series. What fight looks like is students getting on their devices or distractions instead of listening to you or their peers. So they're fighting that mindfulness of being engaged by going to other things. Maybe they're fleeing, but maybe during group discussion, many students are avoiding or reluctant to join the conversation. They're just wanting to escape those situations on their peers, or they're freezing and they're trying to tune in, but they're just freezing and asking, what did you say? Because their mind is somewhere else. And so they're not really at the present moment with you or their peers because of their minds being elsewhere thanks to their current situation and all the things that we could be thinking about, all the things that are going on in the world outside of the walls of the classroom and their homes. So we want to build more predictability with mindful focus. So some of the things that we can do is to help students be mindful of their focus and be mindful of their peers. So goals here are to have students actively listening and responding to their peers with meaningful and rigorous dialogue, and to have developmentally appropriate supports that help students be regularly monitoring their own personal focus and attentiveness to tasks. So these are areas, these are goals that we have for our students. And so if this is your goal, if this feels like what you want for your classroom, then hold on to mindful focus as something that you might consider for this month, as these are great goals that I would love to accomplish this month of March. And then common ground. What do I mean by that? So remember when we talked about the ratio of positive to negative interactions with our students, and how the research that shows us that happy couples thrive when they have more positive interactions than negative interactions, and that applies to us in schools as well with our students, and how many deposits we're able to make into that bank, because we're going to have to make withdrawals. We're going to have those negative interactions and corrections. So as many deposits as we can make in terms of praise and recognition, personal connections with students, having positive classroom flow, is going to make up for the times that we do have to make withdrawals, or we're correcting behavior, we're disapproving of students' behavior through our comments and making those negative nonverbals with the teacher stare or the eye roll. But when we don't have common ground, what we're going to find is we're making more of these withdrawals, and we're finding a harder time making those deposits. And so it's really important to establish some common ground in our classroom so that we can really set the stage for building more positive interactions. And so we really see that a lot of times having a lot of this is a symptom of a lack of common ground in the classroom. And so what that looks like these days is those pits where we're repeating ourselves about certain routines, about certain rules that students are not following, and maybe the students fight that by arguing about the lack of clarity that we have. And so we're making more withdrawals with these situations. Maybe students are fleeing us altogether because of the amount of redirections that we have to give for everyday routines. They start to shut down and avoid us altogether, and they get nervous around us when we approach them. And so those are more withdrawals, right? And then we have times where students freeze and they're just having difficulties shifting across transitions between activities or learning models. So when we move from independent work into a lesson, or vice versa, or moving from small groups back into a whole group lesson, those transitions across different activities in the day or across learning models, if those are really rocky and we're having to get a lot of redirections because students are not quite getting how to transition into the new activity, then that leads to more withdrawals as well that we want to counteract. And so if your goal might be to counter this by having more common ground, what that looks like is building more community expectations and accessible supports. Keeping in mind that a goal of accessible supports, what I mean by that is having that students, after some initial teaching, can be independent in their access and use of the routines and rules that are going to help them succeed in the classroom. So think about when you go to an airport, how independent you are and navigating the routines and the rules of the airport, of how many what can go in your carry-on, and when your flight is, and if it's delayed, and all those things are available to you independently because of the visible accessible supports that are provided. You don't have to really ask a whole lot. People don't have to redirect you too much in those situations because it's accessible to you. And then community expectations. So the goal here is for our classroom rules and expected behaviors, even as they adjust to various activities, are developed with the students and taught to them. That's a really critical key to building more common ground in the classroom. So what we have for you to help you choose between mindful focus or common ground is a pit reflection survey. So I'd encourage you to complete this to see which pits are more common for you right now. And what this looks like here is going to your journal and taking a moment to go down to your third page and complete it like this. So you'll have 4 questions where you choose A or B. So right here I have A, as during this group discussion, students are not paying mindful attention to peers' comments and or not actively including others. And then for B, students are not following the classroom routines. And so I choose which one of those sounds more like what I'm experiencing this week. And so I put an X to the right of A because that's what I am experiencing right now with my students. And so I only choose one for each question, A or B. And then I just put an X in the box that corresponds to that. So then as I continue to go down for each of these, I'm going to choose which one best represents my current pits in my classroom. And at the end, you'll see I have 3 times that I chose the mindful focus pit over the common ground pit 1 time. So out of the 4, I'm more often finding a mindful focus pit. So I hope this really helps you identify which pit you're experiencing more of right now, so that you can choose the right strategy for you. So after you've completed that, you have completed step 2 for this month, and now you're moving on to selecting that target routine of, is it mindful focus or common ground? You don't have to have more details than that right now, but you're identifying which one you want to build a habit around for this month. And so you'll see that in the following page on your journal. Is it mindful focus or common ground? If you want to take a look at those pits that correspond to each, you can see those right here. So I'd love to hear from you. What is your key takeaway from this video? Which strategy are you going to go with for this month? Is it mindful focus or common ground? And after you've done that, you are all done for this video, completed all 3 steps. Keep tracking your voice and choice strategy until next week when you learn more about the strategy that you're going to use. And then continue to take a look at your pulse chart for that. If you need any help, do not hesitate to reach out to me via email or scan this this QR code to set up some office hours with me. But I look forward to hearing from you about is it mindful focus or common ground this month that you'd like to cultivate.